Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. Today I'm going to show you how to fully set up a 3x3 speed cube. So today is going to be my comprehensive tutorial on everything you need to do to set up a 3x3 speed cube to make it turn as well as possible. That includes lubing the core, lubing the pieces, and then tensioning it. Now most of the concepts I'm going to be talking about today should apply to any cube, 3x3 or otherwise, so if you want to set up a 2x2 or a 4x4, you can generally follow this guide as well. It's just going to be a little bit different in the way that you take it apart and reassemble it. So in order to set up your speed cube, you're going to need a few things. First, of course, you need a decent cube to set up. I'm going to be using this new budget magnetic 3x3 from Yushin that I recently unboxed. You also need some lubricant. I'm going to be talking about the different options for this in a minute. And you need a screwdriver. So when it comes to lubrication, there's two distinct steps. The first one is lubing the core, which basically means lubing all the hardware, so the screws and the springs, everything that connects the centerpieces to the core of the cube. And for this, generally, you want a heavier silicone lube, for example, cubicle weight 4. I'm using cubicle lubes in this video. You can use any equivalent lubes to this. The exact thickness of the lube in the core doesn't matter too much. Its real purpose is just to prevent the spring from making any noise and prevent the metal from rubbing up against the plastic and wearing it out too quickly. But generally, you want a heavier lube so that it'll last longer. There's also some specialty core lubes like Lubical Black, which I'm going to be using, which pretty much do the exact same thing, except it'll last longer, and it might even improve the performance of the cube a little bit. Now the other step of lubrication is lubing the pieces, and for this you have a lot more options. I like to use a lighter silicone lube. Weight 2 from the cubicle is what I use in most cubes. This will make everything a little bit smoother. It might also change the speed of the cube depending on how fast the cube already is, as well as how much lube you put in it. Generally a heavier weight will slow down the cube more, which you might want for a really fast cube that you can't control. And there's also some other specialty piece lubes like DNM 37 and Lubical Silk. I really like Silk. It makes the cube a lot smoother without slowing it down at all, and this one will just make your cube faster overall. Now, if you don't know exactly what you want to do to the feel of your cube, I would recommend at the very least using some sort of lighter silicone lube, like this weight 2 here in the pieces. You could probably also get away with using the same lube in the core and the pieces if you really wanted to save money and you had something like a weight 3, although I definitely would recommend getting a standalone heavier lube for the core. Although if you really want to save money and time, I would just skip the entire lubing the core step altogether because it takes a lot more effort to take apart the entire core of the cube, and it doesn't affect the performance of your cube as much as lubing the pieces. Although if you do have some extra money, I definitely would recommend these two, as well as maybe something like Lubical Silk. This is a good starting place for most cubes, I find, with these 3 lubes. Anyway, now on to the actual setup process. The first thing I would recommend you do is to just start breaking in your cube by doing some solves on it. Doing at least a couple dozen break-in solves on a brand new cube before lubing it is always a good idea because it kind of starts to wear down the plastic just a little tiny bit in key areas, which could help the lubricant work better, and it will give you a better idea of how the cube actually feels, and it'll give you a better idea of how much lubricant and what types to use. Now once you finish with that, we can go ahead and start lubing the core by just taking the cube apart. I'm going to do this by just starting to unscrew one centerpiece. I'm going to assume you guys already know how to take apart and reassemble a 3x3. If not, I'll leave a link down in the description to my tutorial. Anyway, we're not only going to have to take the cube apart, but we're also going to have to disassemble all of these individual centerpieces. So I took this one centerpiece apart right here. We're going to have to repeat that with all the other centerpieces. So just unscrew the screws on every single side after taking the caps off. So now that we've got everything fully disassembled, we're going to proceed by lubing each one of these centerpieces individually. So we'll just move all the rest of them off to the side. And looking at one individual centerpiece right here, we're just going to be very carefully taking out the hardware. Generally what you'll find is you'll have the screw, and you'll have a spring, then a washer. This one's actually a little bit different because the washer is up here next to the head of the screw. Normally it's the other way around, but it doesn't really matter. Basically all I'm going to be doing is applying a little bit of lubricant on each of the points of contact on this piece of hardware. So I'll put a little bit underneath the spring where the spring touches the plastic. I'll put a little bit around the spring where it's touching the screw. I'll put a little bit at the top and maybe in between the washer and the screw. So let's go ahead and get the lubricant out. So what you want to do is just take your hardware like this and then just very carefully put a little bit maybe around the spring like this, maybe at the top of here, spread it around the washer, and maybe in between the washer and the screw too, if we can get it inside of there. And then I'll also put a little bit at the bottom of the spring where it's touching the plastic. Really, there's no exact defined way to do this. There's no exact amount that you need to have on there. Just have enough, not too much, and then we'll very carefully put the spring back inside of here, just like this, and we'll get our screwdriver and screw this back into the core to signify that we're done with this centerpiece. And then you just want to repeat this with all the rest of the centerpieces. Also, another way to apply the lubricant, which you might find a little bit easier, instead of, say, applying it directly to the washer right here, you can apply it to the same spot on the centerpiece inside of here where the washer touches the plastic. So you can see kind of down in the centerpiece, there's kind of a lower ring as well as an upper ring. That's where the spring and the head of the screw touch the plastic respectively. So if you want, you can also just take a little bit of lubricant and spread it around onto that top ring as well as a little bit onto that bottom ring. And then you can put a little bit more onto the hardware, like maybe right on the spring, and then apply it in the same way. Then once you've screwed in the centerpiece, you can kind of pull it like this and move it around to kind of spread out the lubricant inside of there. You could even lubricate a little bit right there where the screw touches the centerpiece right there. But now the really important part about screwing in all these centerpieces is making sure that the tensions on all of them are even. It doesn't necessarily matter if the tensions are correct, we can fix that later. It just matters that they're all the same. So what I like to do is to use the threads on the screw as a reference to see how far I've screwed it in. So as you can see here, we have about 3 threads left over. So I'm going to go a little bit further. So I'm just going to turn it until there's about 1 thread left over. You can see right there. And that's about the same as I did on this other one. We have about 1 thread there and 1 thread there. So they're exactly even. And you want to make sure, no matter how many threads you have showing, that it's exactly the same on all 6 centerpieces. This will allow you to get the tensions exactly how you want them later on. If the cube's too loose, once you put it together, you just go around and tighten each side by the exact same amount. That way you know that the tensions are still all even. And then by just doing little adjustments like that, you can get the cube exactly how you like it. So now that the cube is lubed, assembled, and tensioned properly, we can go ahead and get on with the assembly of most of the rest of the cube. One thing you will want to note though, is that sometimes cubes are lubed right out of the box. So you want to wipe off this factory lube before applying lube of your own. So just use a cloth or something that won't leave any kind of residue, and then go ahead and start reassembling the puzzle down to the last couple of pieces. Okay, so now that we're at this point here with just a couple pieces left, it's time to apply our piece lube. If you're just applying this and not lubricating the core, you can pretty much start by just taking a couple pieces out and then applying the lube. So getting the lube out here. What we want to do is lube a few of the different surfaces on the inside of the cube. As you can see, I'm just putting a decent amount on this surface. You don't want to do too much more than this to start off with. And then also we're going to be looking at this inner surface here where the corner and edge pieces touch the underside of the centerpiece. So I'm just going to put an even smaller amount right on there. And now what we can do is finish assembling the cube like this. And then we can start working in the lube by just turning the cube. So what we want to do is just kind of turn that side that we put it all in, and then kind of start turning the rest of the cube and working the lube into the rest of the pieces. Anyway, after working in the lube for a few minutes, maybe doing a couple solves on it, if you still feel that there's not quite enough inside the cube, what you can do is take out a couple pieces just like we had before, and then just apply a little bit more lube inside just like we did. So I feel like this could use maybe a tiny little bit more right on the outside right there, and then we'll reassemble the cube and keep working it in. Anyway, now is also the point if you want to apply anything else like Lubrical Silk. I like putting this in almost all my cubes, so I'm going to do that right now. Or like DNM 37 if you feel like it needs to be a little bit faster. You don't really even have to take some pieces out. You can kind of just spread open a gap inside the pieces, drop a drop right there into the inner part of the cube, maybe a drop on the outer part too, and then go ahead and start working that in as well. I'd say the most important part of this process is just applying the lube a little bit at a time. If you have some lube that you don't know what it'll do to a cube, and you put a whole bunch of it in at the very start, and it gets really slow and sluggish, it'll be really hard to clean it back out and try again. So it's really important to just go one little bit at a time, put some in, test out the cube, put some more in. Anyway, once we're at this point, it's time to start tensioning the cube, just like I was talking about earlier. So basically what you want to do is feel the cube. I think mine is a little bit too loose, so what I'll do is I'll tighten one side just like this. I'll just do like 1 wrist turn on it, like that, and then I'll go around to the rest of the sides and do the exact same thing. So 1 wrist turn on this side, and then after adjusting the tensions evenly on all 6 sides, you can go ahead and try out the cube again. I still think it's a little bit too loose, but maybe not a whole wrist turn, so this time I'll maybe go like halfway, just like that. And I'll do the exact same thing on all 6 sides. Just keep doing fine adjustments like this until you get it exactly how you want it. There we go. And let's try out the cube again. I think that's just about perfect for me. So what we're going to do at this point is reapply the center caps. So make sure you put them on in the right spot. So white opposite yellow, and get the rest of your color scheme correct. And after solving your cube again, you have now completely set up your cube by fully lubricating it and tensioning it exactly how you like it. Anyway, I hope you guys found that video useful. If you have any questions, be sure and leave them down in the comments down below. Also down in the description below, I'll put links to all the different tutorials that I mentioned, as well as links to all the different lubricants that I've been talking about throughout this video, if you want to buy some of them from the cubicle. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.